This is Albert Embankment, SE1, just across the river, of course, from Lambeth Palace. What's interesting is you would not imagine that Albert Embankment could be, well, surrounded by so much showbiz. But as we're going to show you in this very short film today, there's been a lot of showbiz history going on, including a blonde bombshell, an international Hollywood star, a Fab Four-piece, and of course people that certainly could be persuaded into making sure that you watch them every week on your TV screens in the 70s. So come with me as I take you on a quick tour of Albert Embankment. This is beautiful Lambeth Palace, and of course it's noted in so many of the history books. Who could forget, of course, the abdication, that all the detail that went on here in 1936 against the would-be king, and of course that woman, Mrs. Wallis Simpson. But in today's show, this particular scene is really relevant simply because right here behind me is where the Hollywood legend Jayne Mansfield stood while filming her movie Too Hot to Handle. And as you'll see from these pictures, she did get about in this particular area.
Too hot to handle, her every wish must be obeyed. You'll have to learn how to live in the sun with no sign of shade. Because the lady's much too hot to handle.
As you'll see, it's not as glamorous as it is today. You know, this was kind of an underdeveloped area, if you like. So that was part of the reason why some people came to film here. It was cheap to film, the council didn't charge you too much, and of course, to get somebody of Jayne's power and celebrity to literally be filming in this area way back in the early 60s was definitely something. Now, if you're a fan of Jayne, this is a particularly dramatic role. She changed scenes. She was still the blonde bombshell, of course, but she was also going for a darker look, trying to prove to everybody that she was an actress. We lost Jayne also far too early at the very young age of 34. But that wasn't until, of course, Britain totally embraced her. She turned on the Blackpool lights, opened the Chiswick flyover, and of course, had a starring role week at Batley Variety Club, all for £20,000 a week. And she even visited Armley Jail to entertain the boys inside too. What a star. So here is the scene where the gorgeous Hollywood blonde bombshell Jayne Mansfield is seen running along here. Well, actually not running, tottering, of course, on high heels. She just left Lambeth Palace, and there's a lot of pictures actually, if you want to check this out, in the Jayne Mansfield sites of her filming in and around this particular area. What was nice was the fact that at that point Jayne had become a huge star, but had come over to England because 20th Century Fox decided to loan her out. After she'd enjoyed huge success with The Girl Can't Help It, they then decided that of course they would turn her Broadway musical, Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter, into a movie too. That didn't quite take off. So Darryl F. Zanuck decided he needed to get a return for his money, and he loaned her out to lots of, shall we say, lower budget British movies, including, of course, The Sheriff of the Fractured Jaw, when she was filming Too Hot to Handle. Her star had really plummeted over in the US, and she was more than happy to come over and make this type of movie. And what's interesting as well is Jayne wasn't the only blonde bombshell in the movie. Oh no, it also had a part for another blonde carry-on legend, the one and only Dame Barbara Windsor. But again, if you're in the area and you want to sort of piece up the pictures and look around and see exactly where Jayne Mansfield stood, then this particular area, which is now a cafe, is the area for you. Now this is Lambeth Bridge, known worldwide of course, and particularly around New Year's Eve time when the bridge is packed with all the revellers enjoying the sounds of Big Ben. But what does it have to do with musical theatre? And more importantly, the likes of Lord Andrew Lloyd Webber and of course the brilliant Cameron Mackintosh. Well, according to Andrew Lloyd Webber, this bridge was the scene of a big fallout between three titans of musical theatre. It was around the time they were putting together Phantom of the Opera. It had nothing to do, let me point out, with my favourite musical legend, the one and only Michael Crawford. But as Lloyd Webber points out in his book, it resulted in two people having an argument, getting out of the car here on Lambeth Palace Bridge, and Lloyd Webber and the rest of the gang carrying on across the bridge and of course going on to huge success as part of Phantom of the Opera. If you want to know the true inside story, pick up Andrew Lloyd Webber's book, Unmasked. If you love musical theatre, you're certainly going to love that particular read. One of my all-time favourite shows was the 60s classic Randall and Hopkirk Deceased. It starred of course Mike Pratt, Kenneth Cope and the beautiful Annette Andre, who came into the studio to tell me all about the cult show. Fascinating stuff. But of course, did you know that Randall and Hopkirk did film a lot on location, including here, as you will see from this picture. Mike Pratt was standing there, of course, with a character called Natasha, with this view right behind them. Not only that, in a future episode, they also filmed just over here by Lambeth Palace. There was a bit of a chase, and one of the baddies jumped over this grass and ran down alongside the embankment too. That's what I love about this area. Wherever you turn, wherever you look, there's something wonderful and something very showbiz about SE1 Albert Embankment. Now behind me here is Millbank Tower. And way back in the early 60s, this was considered one of the height of sophistication. Of course, it was an office block, it had all those modern amenities, and was ideal if you were filming any movie. Now, one of the big TV shows that used Millbank Tower was none other than one of my all-time favourites, The Persuaders, which starred, of course, Hollywood legends Tony Curtis and Sir Roger Moore. Now what you see when you both see Tony and Roger entering into the building is the genuine building that they go in. But as soon as they arrive through the glass and into the foyer and go towards the lift, that in fact was Elstree Studios and a mixture of Pinewood too. What's interesting though is that Roger, when I interviewed him at the studios here, just up the road in Albert Embankment, said he remembered recording that particular episode well, simply because they managed to close off all of the roads because the Persuaders were in town filming. That was the power of Roger and Tony, and more importantly, the money power of Mr. Lou Grade, the TV mogul that created such wonderful shows, part of the ITC family. Now the beauty about Albert Embankment really is this showbiz on every corner, and the building behind me here will mean a lot to many if you're a huge Beatles fan. And let's face it, who's not a Beatles fan? Way back in the early 60s, Brian Epstein, the super manager of the Beatles, arrived here at Decca Records. It may not look much now, but way back in that particular period, Decca Records was a very powerful label, and it had a lot of major stars on it. And that day, Brian Epstein was hoping that he too could get his 4 young boys from Liverpool signed to one of the world's biggest record labels. And as the famous story goes, of course, sadly it didn't quite work out. But what was Decca Records' loss was certainly EMI and Parlophone's gain, and continues to be EMI's gain right until this day.